that's a priority, right? Saying nice things about Mark Stewart, but no, for everybody, and I admit that I am somewhat influenced by it. It's the number of views, the number of likes, the number of comments, and what
Yeah,
have you. And everybody thinks that bigger numbers
is better.
means something, but
Yeah,
not really. If you got a smaller group of people, but they are die hard,
that's way better.
right? There are people who will, proverbially follow you to the ends of the world type of thing,
Yeah,
right? I was just reading about that, about having Raven fans and what have you, and how good that is for your marketing efforts. You know what I
yeah,
mean? Right? So like my former business mentor, he I mean this literally happened. And his people were so well trained. The news broke that he was getting divorced. So they knew that there was going to be a seminar because he was not going to be paying the bill for the divorce. He was gonna put on an event, and the proceeds from that event would go to the divorce. So everybody, right. So everybody hears that he's getting divorced, and they're like, "Okay, we're looking for the sales letter anytime now," right?
that's pretty funny.
But that's what you want, and the thing about it is that they don't mind. You know what I mean? They
Yeah,
don't mind because they
they're creating
value.
value. You're creating value.
Right. They value what you're putting out there. You
Yeah,
see? So I'll admit another thing. I'm like, okay, can I have a Jeet Kune dialogue with Mahipal Lunia? And for those of you joining, eavesdropping on our conversation, this is Dwight Woods, the Jeet Kune Rebel. This is the Jeet Kune Dialogues episode number 253 with the aforementioned Mahipal Lunia. And those of you who don't know who he is, right? You suck. Those of you,
he's talking about me. That I suck.
right? No, no, right? And those of you who are wondering, well, because believe this or not, Mahi, there are people who go, well, why is Dwight having this guy on? It's Jeet Kune dialogues. Because see, I can be told who to bring on my show.
Yeah,
Right? You see, like I actually, like I stay awake at night, hoping for approval from people.
and also presumes they know what I do. Yeah.
Right? Okay.
Hey,
So
but that's the good thing about a show like this. You don't like it, shut it off. Yeah,
exactly. Exactly. Nobody's forcing you. I mean, as much as I want to grow this thing, especially in 2023 and the ideas that I have for what we'll be doing and what have you. But that's why I was interested. I mean, that's more than one reason. So let me give you guys a little bit of background. I think we met probably 5 years ago when you started the first event, the first which was 2018, I think, right?
yeah. I think we met before that when I was starting to look at stick clicking, and I was trying to. I think Bert put you and me in touch.
That's true. Right. Yeah. Okay. Right. So right there, if you guys understand, if you're so cool and so um, in tune to know when he says Bert, put us in touch to know who Bert is, then we don't have to explain ourselves, right? Right. But it's interesting. What something that happened the other day that made me think of you. Um, Somebody was talking about whether or not Kali could replace the fencing or should replace, I forget now the details of it, the fencing in in Jeet Kune Do aspect, right? Because everybody knows Wing Chun, boxing, fencing are supposed to be um, the foundations of Jeet Kune Do, right? So let's start there, right? Does that question make any sense to you in any shape or form?
Yes and no. And what I mean by that is, yes, I understand the words coming out and what they're trying to
Right,
ask.
right.
No, because I think without context, it makes no sense. So what are we talking about? Are we talking about a personal self-defense art, right? Are you
Hmm.
talking about just me expressing myself and how I move and where I want to go, right? Ultimately,
Right.
having complete freedom. Or am I talking about a war art? Because look, at least the way Eskrima Kali is, you didn't do that just for personal self-defense. These were tribal and clan arts. And the reason
Yes.
you did that was to protect your whole clan and your village for the most part, right? So I
Hmm.
think when we mix contexts, it can sometimes be lost, right? Me
Yeah.
personally, do I think it can replace it? At least the way I understand JKD, I don't think so, but that's me.
Okay. Wait, go deeper on that. The way you understand Jeet Kune.
Yeah.
Right?
Oh boy.
Because I sense see, because here's what I know about you. Um, you smile a lot, but you smile a lot because that masks how serious you are with everything that comes out of your mouth. Okay? So when you say, "Ma'am, I don't think that fencing could replace I don't think that Kali could replace fencing." Here's what I'm hearing. Because Jeet Kune Do is not a serious art.
That's not what I said. I think
I'm
not
trying
at
to put
all.
words in your mouth.
No, I know. It's all right.
Yeah.
I can play. I can play. um, the context matters, right?
Right.
So would I take JKD into a martial environment where one clan's fighting another? Probably not. I think
Hmm.
JKD, at least the way I get it, and the way I understand it, and the way I've played with people, it's a wonderful, wonderful art for your personal expression. It's a wonderful art for you to grow as an individual. So it
Hmm.
has tremendous, tremendous value there, right? And ultimately, I think look, a lot of his philosophy, Bruce's philosophy, right, is intertwined with JK. You and I have talked about this. And JK was not the originator of that philosophy, it's age old Indian philosophy. And
Right.
it ultimately became Asian philosophy. So of that idea of you going on your path is as old as India, right? And one of the old sayings in India is that show me one group that has enlightened together in
Hmm.
all these thousands of years. Zero. It's always an individual. So when you're going on that path of pure personal expression or pure enlightenment, where you have that total aha moment and it's able to express itself through who you are, right? That's always
Right.
individual. So I think we should make that distinction. At least in my world, I make that distinction between things that are just for my own individual art, my own individual expression, and then those that are truly martial in that way. So I think a truly martial art where you learned how to fight only mainly in formations would could possibly suck in a one-on-one situation. And similarly, somebody who's only trained in one-on-one situation, what do you get? You get a lot of prima donnas, Well, you would never have that in Jeet Kune Do, and you put them and try to get them to function in a team environment. Doesn't always work well.
Right.
So, but to answer your question, can fencing be replaced? I don't think so, because at least the way I understand JKD, and again, I don't make a living doing this. I don't proclaim myself as a JKD expert, but it's fencing plus boxing, right?
Yeah.
And with the very clear flair of kung fu. You can call it what you want. You can add things to it. That's your prerogative. But I think looking at both Kali and looking at fencing, they're very, very different animals, right? They're very, very different animals. And the reason I was talking about that is fencing, most of it grew up from dueling, which is one on one. And then when you
Right.
look at Kali, it is one against many in its
Right.
truest possible sense. So again, you're mixing apples and oranges. And from my perspective, you got to do a little more homework than that.
Yeah. I mean, I think that to the best of my understanding, really, the fencing influence is some footwork applications and the idea of the lead hand as a
The true
blade,
times, yes.
right? You know, that type of thing. And then he even used some fencing terminology for like parry and stuff and what have you. But what what then? What would you say if somebody started to do an in-depth study of fencing? What are some things that they would be surprised to find out about?
Man, that's like a big topic. So
Yeah.
by the way, so I want to save this for another time because this is a road that James and I have started going down together,
Hmm.
word by word, looking at all the fencing references, looking at how it correlates with everything, including
Right.
all the books, and saying, okay, these were the particular influences that came in, and this is what's important on your one-on-one. And then again, we're talking about taking an armed art, right, and
Right.
translating it over to empty hand fighting. So that limits the scope in some ways. But even if you look at just fencing, which period are you talking about? Which school are you talking about? Are you talking about the Spanish, the Italian,
Hmm.
the French, or a hybrid? Or are you talking about sport fencing? Yeah,
Right.
just as an example, right? Just as a very simple example, it'll be like to say, okay, we're talking about destreza, Spanish fencing, but which period? Are we talking about 15th century or are we talking about 18th century? Are we talking about Carranza? Are we talking about Radha? And it
Yeah.
changes completely, right? So it would be like saying, okay, what aspect of Eskrima came into, say, JKD concepts, right?
Right.
Can you answer that question? No, you can't,
No.
because it would depend on, hey, are we talking about Villebre Largusa? Are we talking about Angel? Are we talking
Right.
about Heron? Are we talking about Guy? Right?
Yeah.
So I think it's that broad a question, but I think it merits studying, at least in terms of, okay, what were his core influences and does it matter to me? So I think there are two different questions there, at least from my perspective. One
Yeah.
is, okay, historically, what mattered, say, to Bruce, right? And just because
Right.
it worked for him doesn't mean it will work for me, right? And he could pull it off doesn't mean I can pull it off.
Now, let me ask you something. The James to whom you referred a few minutes
Bishop,
ago.
yeah, your
Okay.
buddy.
Right.
Yeah.
See, because I know there's another James who plays a prominent role in your life, Keating.
Oh yeah.
Right. So I
Yeah.
was I wasn't
I,
sure.
I I don't refer.
Okay. Okay. Wait. I lost your audio.
Yeah, I said I don't refer to him as James. He's
Okay.
mainly Uncle Jim to
Right.
me.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Um, okay. So let's do a little background thing. Um, you want to talk about your background? Because I that's another thing that I sense. It's like he doesn't want to talk too much about himself. He wants to talk about the arts and the program and
Yeah,
what have
look,
you.
man,
But
I'm bored.
you gotta tell people a little bit, right?
What do you want to know?
Um, well, so let's do this one because nobody's asked you this in a long time. The very first thing you did in martial art.
YMCA karate, Shotokan. Yeah, I was a little kid getting picked up and beaten up, being the only Indian kid around.
Right.
Um, and my dad got fed up of having his son come busted up all the time. He's like, "You got to learn how to fight." So
Hmm.
YMCA.
Okay. All right. So now let's fast track Shotokan and then intense study of Hoplology.
Okay.
Right. So okay. Well, so those. I mean, they're. Are there weapons in Shotokan yet?
Not when I was doing it.
Not
Yeah,
when I was in, not when I was in it, right?
yeah. I mean,
Um,
I think we did a little bit of tonfa and some my instructor
really?
added some nunchucks, some kabuto thing. But
Wow.
Jesus, that was so long ago. I can't
Your
remember.
your instructor was adventurous. Um, I had a makiwara in my backyard long before the Shotokan school got one.
Hmm.
Yeah, So yeah. Um, so can you fill in? Not it doesn't have
Oh
to
boy.
be the entire thing,
Okay.
right? But just fill in that blank a little bit, so we have a
Okay. So
sense
that's
of.
about 30 years, right?
Yeah.
So briefly, right? I was deeply into Japanese arts, or whole spectrum of Japanese arts, and then of course Indian martial arts. That was something in the family, and within our clans, I come from the Northwest Frontier region. So the Rajputana arts, the frontier arts, is what we learned. So basically, from the time you're little, you're given a sword. You know, you're basically just given a sword and dagger, and like, okay, this is the beginning of your journey forward, right?
Right.
So that was one major thread. The second major thread was Southeast Asian martial arts. Again, we a whole bunch of them. Saw guys like Ron Saturno move, saw guys like Jaime Caballero move, and then also going down to Philippines and seeing a whole different spectrum of folks there. And along the way, these borders are so fragile, meaning, today's borders were not borders that were 50 years ago or 100 years ago, and especially the arts moved around a lot.
Right.
So the intermix also with the Indonesian arts, with Silat, right? And me learning some of the Moro arts, and getting into Silat, and then seeing the crossover between the Silat arts and the Indian martial arts, and actually finding threads of how these things moved. That kind of started me on it. And then second, growing up reading about, and then the Americana with Maestro Keating, and a few other things, and now getting into a lot of the historical European arts, especially with the Destreza and the like. Right? So that's kind of the brief background, right?
Right.
How did Hoplology? Well, as a kid, I would read Don Drager's early books and Robert W. Smith's books, and be like, oh my
Uh-huh.
God, this is so damn cool. I want to
Right.
go there. I want to be able to do those things. And along with that, with my dad, I grew up learning how to climb. So we would go climbing all across the Himalayas and this and that. So there was this marriage of martial arts and adventure, kind of like coming together for me. And one thing led to the other, and at one stage, one of my teachers, I was trying to convince him to record all of his arts, because he was one of his kind, the last of his line. I mean, he's passed on an art to me, but I'm not a purist, if you know what I mean. Sometimes, if you want to preserve a pure art form, you need somebody who can be completely dedicated to that, right? Otherwise, can't do justice to it. So I wanted the whole thing recorded, and he said something very astute, and that started me on this journey. He said, if you want to save my art, you have to save all the arts. I said, what do you mean? He's like, look, it's only in conflict. When my art conflicts with others, you get meaning, because it's all a relationship. Who did I get into how did these arts get into conflict with, and why, and what came out superior? Why did it come out superior? What can
Yeah.
I learn from them? And what was it about me that informed them? So that started this journey, right?
Mhm.
And so I said, okay, let me start putting some of these symposiums together, whatnot. So the idea was, okay, let's look at either one weapon or one idea or one concept, right? And then bring all these guys who may or may not like each other, or work or don't work with each other, together in one
Right.
place, one time,
Right.
for between 30 and 40 hours, and lock the rooms, right? So that was a crazy idea. Everyone told me, you're freaking batshit crazy, dude. It's not
Yeah.
going to work. I think that's when you and I started talking too, and you told me, "Hey, did you invite Guru Inasanto to it?" And I said, "I've been trying to reach him, but I wasn't able to reach him then." So anyway, so that's how this stuff started. And that point, Guru Bert Richardson and I have been talking, and we were talking about some of the arts in the Americas. And while Draeger and others, everyone had fallen in love with Asia, and this whole Asian fixation was going on for 50 years, right?
Right.
We were not exploring the arts in our own background, in our own backyard, whether it is the Bowie knife, whether it is stick licking, whether it is a Trinidadian kalinda, whether it's the
Yeah.
Indo-African jab, whether it is esgrima criolla in Argentina, whether it is Colombian grima, whether it is the Mexican Bowie, or the new Spanish army sword fighting within the Mexicals, right? No one was looking at this. And if you really think about it, the last great blade culture in the world was the Americas. The last great blade culture in the world was and is the Americas. So he said, okay, let's start our investigations and start Hoplology and start looking at the investigations. Yeah, because you have a lot of guys who are in love with Asia and everything Asian, and they're already studying that. But let's look at the Americas. So started off with those expeditions, and I led that one. We did so the things we did were Barbadian stick licking. We did the Trinidadian kalinda and the jab. Then went to Portugal to look at Jogo de Pau. Then also worked with the Southeast Asia, a bunch of systems that were not fully ever archived before, everything from Kali Lestrisimo with Mangromi Makapagal to Payate Arnis to Tapado to Lapu Lapu and the systems of Bakalod, right? And then finally worked with the last Maori warrior priest. He's the last of his line, the arts of Rongomomo. So most people, when they think about the Maori arts, they only think about the teha, which is the long stick and the stick and the spear, so to speak, right? But there's there's another aspect of the art that is hardly ever shown outside, right? And so worked with the last of the Maori priests, and then COVID hit, right? So COVID hit. And,
Yeah, that's it. Yeah.
Like some of us, we just want to go out and do shit, especially if you have that bug, you just want to go out and do things. And so I said, okay, I'm not able to go out anywhere. I'm not able to do anything. Let me start figuring out how to work in this new world environment.
Right.
That's when Belzer Sensei and I connected, and he had seen some of my work. And then Belzer Sensei, long-time JKD person, from the 70s. He was also he's the person who gave Kali Lestrisimo its name, because he was with Tatang Lestrisimo in the 70s, right? The 70s and 80s. And he's the man who coined the term Kali Lestrisimo. And anyway, so Belzer Sensei and I connected, and such a fine gentleman. He's a warrior's warrior, and he's a martial artist. And if you know anything about me, I don't say those words simply or easily, right?
Yeah.
And he and I connected, and he's like, I'm going to send you some things. I'm like, sure. And then this huge box package comes up with the unpublished book of Don Draeger on the theory of Hoplology and all his private letters that were entrusted to him. I'm looking through it, and I'm like, holy crap. And he's like, okay, so this is what we're going to do. We're going to go through it word by word together. And I'm going to walk you through the whole thing, and we're going to work on this together so that you can tie it. You can tie your work to the stuff that you've done in the past. And he was very generous and kind with his time and everything. And he said, you're doing everything that he would have wanted to do, that Draeger would have wanted to do. So that was a really high compliment, especially coming from somebody of Belzer Sensei's standing. So spent 2 years, man, coming on more than 2 years, every Thursday morning, going through one piece at a time, one letter at a time, each of the pieces. And he said the last time Draeger Sensei had asked him to do that was with the guys of the old International Hoplological Society, Chip Hunter and Dr. David Hole, and he had actually walked them through the entire book again, one word at a time, systematically analyzing it. And then he did that again 30 years later now with me. And then we also opened up all the old letters that I don't think anyone outside of him have seen. We went through that. So that's how the Hoplology came in. So in some ways, I was already doing my Hoplology around the world, right? But this
Okay,
was
right, yeah.
also tying a bridge to the past, with Draeger being one end, and then before him was Sir Richard Burton, right? Who I think he's a hoplologist, and did some of the coolest, meanest, craziest things possible in the Victorian era.
Wow. I always feel so underinformed when I talk with you.
Oh man,
Um,
that's not my intent.
listen. Adventurer, is that avocation or vocation? Researcher slash educator, avocation or vocation?
It's just who you are, man.
Right.
No, it's just. Uh, I think when you truly love something, you are just it, man. And then
Mhm.
doesn't matter what you do, it shows up.
Right.
When you truly, truly, truly love something.
Yeah. So okay, so you dropped some names, and do you think you think it's possible if I run the video, you can talk about everybody for 30 seconds?
Oh, you mean who's coming to the event?
Yeah, because we
Can
gotta
I,
we
can I
gotta
just give you a
promote the event.
little info on the event, because I think people may not know what the hell I'm talking about.
Yeah. So let's talk about the event now.
Okay, so the event is called Holy Blood, Holy Blade. Okay, so the way the whole thing started is that whole
In,
other BS around Kali and Eskrima, right? So
right.
everyone loves to have either very mythical roots for it, or how deeply influential uh, uh, Spanish destreza and Eskrima was to FMA. So everyone kept telling me, "Hey, the roots are Spanish Eskrima or Spanish destreza." And then one day I'm like, okay, if that's the root, why the hell am I studying all this? Let me go study the root, because if
Uh-huh.
that's the root, that's where the secrets will be, right? So
Right.
that started that path along with a teacher of mine, Mushtaq Ali Ansari. Uh, so anyway, so we started that, and we said, okay. So in looking at it, we said, okay, the first great world empire was the Spanish Empire. Think about it. They ruled from Philippines all the way to the New World. So the
Mhm.
first kingdom where the sun never set was the Spanish Empire. So he said, okay, one of the core principles of what we are building in the new Hoplology, and my own personal perspective, is that you want to be a comprehensivist. I think it was Robert Heinlein who said specialization is for insects, and if you want to be a human, you be a generalist. Anyway, so the idea of being a comprehensivist. So he said, okay, let's look at everywhere where Spain ended up, and what was the influence of that particular fighting on those cultures, both whom they fought against, and who they fought with, and what they fought for. So we are looking at about 500 to 700 years of history across 5 continents, everywhere where the Spaniards clashed. Because if you're trying to understand an art, like you and I were talking before we went live, it's all about a relationship. And if you and I spar, you're going to inform my fighting, and I'm going to inform your fighting, right? And in the middle of that, a dance emerges, and whoever gets the better rhythm wins, right?
Right. Yeah.
We said, okay, so let's look at that. So we said, okay, the 3 really well-known Destreza masters, we brought all 3 of them together here. That's not happened before, right? And then we said, let's look at the Northern African arts, because Africa, the Islam and Christianity was in clash always. Africans had a curved sword. The Spaniards had a straight blade. So what is the relationship between curved and straight blade fighting? So having that. And then, of course, coming down to the Philippines, it's named Philippines after King Philip. So we said we wanted two expressions from Philippines. One is those areas that were conquered, and therefore there could have been some kind of a marriage, right, or some
Hmm.
kind of
Yeah.
informing together. And the other is Mindanao, never conquered by anybody, not the Spanish
Right.
nor the Americans, right? I do believe this is one of the first times that arts from Mindanao are being shown in the open, right? And if you know anything about Mindanao arts, these guys don't talk. The morals don't talk. You know,
Right. These, yeah, I remember Sifu Inosano saying that, and I think Ron Kosakowski also verified it, that to this day, you could those you can still see those guys walking around with the blade on their side.
not just that. It's more than that. If you have the gall to say you're showing a Moro art, you can be assured a Moro will show up at your door. I've seen
Uh,
this.
wow.
Okay, so and
Yeah.
so believe me, they'll show up and they'll want to see. Oh yeah, show me what you're doing.
Right.
So before you mess around with the Kampilan and set some auto art, be sure you want to welcome that into your life, right?
Yeah.
And then moving on to the new world, save Brazil, they were all across the Americas. So what was the influence on the various arts in the Americas? So that's the question we sought to answer. And then the people that you have, I can briefly talk about them and what they bring to the table.
Yeah. Okay. Wait. But fill in a blank for me concerning Mindanao. Um, that is there still a separatist movement going on in Mindanao even today?
Let's just put it this way, right? When we're down in Philippines, and Bangromi, JJ, Fabrizio Mansur, Ron Saturno, uh, uh, guys like and a few others, Elric Yundes, and all these guys were with us. We were doing this work together. One of the
Mhm.
places we want to go to Mindanao, and they said, "Dude, you don't want to go there. They're still bombing the hell out of that place." So uh, I think it's always been its own thing, and they are really, really proud people, and I think you should just
Right.
let them be. Just let them be. So I
I
think,
remember.
quite frankly, I think they are their own.
Yeah.
They're their own people. So just let them be.
I remember early in the early days hearing Sifudan talk about them in not in detail, but I sensed that what he was saying, he was talking about them in what I call an elevated manner.
Look, they are fearless. They are
Right.
fearless. They manage to maintain their old traditions, right? And I think it's Mindanao is such an interesting place. And I'm not talking about countries or anything, and but it's this amalgamation of everything from Indonesia with the Silat arts, from Borneo, and then from Philippines. And in many ways, it's still a fierce fighting culture, right? So
Right.
I would say in some ways within that region, some of the old stuff, if it's preserved, it's being preserved here. I mean, to this
Yeah.
day, you can't get most people to teach outside of blood and clan lines to this day.
Yeah.
So it's very weird for an Indian guy, in the US to have. Luckily, had access to it, but yeah, it took years
Yeah.
to
But
open the door.
but you're no regular Indian guy. I'm trying to remember because I didn't have time to look it up. I'm trying to remember. You said something really funny a few months ago on Facebook. I think it was in reference to the British. Do you remember what I'm talking about?
Yeah, I said
What
the British
what
conquered
was
both
what?
my homelands, and we kicked them out in two different ways, violently and non-violently. And I've learned methods. Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
I thought of it. I was like, that's so true, right? That's so true. But you're. I mean, there are. I don't personally. I can't think of anybody else who has. Oh yeah, I can. That actress, Archie Punjabi. because she's both British and American. So she would qualify as somebody. Yeah. Okay. Anyhow, moving on. Um, so yeah, let me try to run the video. It should work. I don't think I messed. I don't think I messed anything up here. So let's see. Um, okay. So
Tonpui. So this is the latest stage of Destreza. He's probably the greatest expert on the latest stage Radha Destreza. Pick Curtis, he learned the early Destreza methods and how that came into play. So he's going to be coming and showing what the early 14th and 15th century swordplay was. He's also a master of the Italian school, and he's going to be showing the difference between the Spanish, the Italian, and the German sense of true time. So when you think about true time, what we were talking about in fencing, which true time are we talking about? And
right.
the difference between these three schools, how do you compare and contrast that? Ronlu Latigo Idaga, basically the whip and dagger. He's been very close to the Kanyate family, and he was very instrumental in bringing Latigo Idaga back into the Philippines, into its popular culture, if you will, right? And then
Wow.
uh,
That's
uh,
it.
Tim Riviera, super mystery man to most people, one of the few who's both qualified with an FMA World, having for over 25 years done Payate Arnis, and for over 25 years, he's also been doing Destreza Kumon. This was the street fighting aspects, or Destreza Bulgar, the 30 odd techniques of Destreza Bulgar. And he's the man for that. So he's going to talk about, is there a real relationship between FMA and and the Spanish methods? Okay, well, come there to find it. I want
Okay.
more of it. We did Tom Pui.
Right. You already. Yeah. So he showed up twice, I guess. And
Adam. So Adam is one of the guys who's working on historical African martial arts, and he's also been learning some living traditions from Northern Africa. Lives lives currently in Canada, and he's going to come and talk about the sword play that was pre-Destreza, and how the Muslims and the Africans were in Africa and in Andalusia, how they fought with the blade, especially the curved blade called nimcha, and then also going to do some of the initial work with the matreg, which is the Algerian Egyptian long staff, right? Because back then you basically had your sword, shield, and you had your stick and spears. So that's what he's going to do. These arts have not been seen before, right?
right.
Anthony DeLongis, well, long-time JKD, long-time bullwhip person. He's going to show his bullwhip stuff. Dexter, a brother of mine, another fellow student of Maestro Keating, very low profile. He's going to be working on the Bowie knife with me. We are going to open up the stories around the Bowie knife, the 4 ranges it works on, the 3 specific methods, the idea of true times, and some of the fighting methods. Now, see, the Bowie it's very weird, man. It's a very weird culture, right?
You know, I was, because I had not noticed when I first downloaded the snapshots. I didn't notice you and the Bowie knife. So I was actually going to open up the conversation and say, Mahi, why the Bowie knife?
Because it's a bloody badass knife. Number one. Number two, it makes a statement when you remove it. Number 3, it's the last great knife of the American frontier, and it's used by gentlemen. It was a knife that was given to African slaves that were freed. The symbol of their freedom was the Bowie knife. So a lot of people
Really?
thought, yes, and that's how they also got the name Freeman. And when they became free, they were given a Bowie knife.
Wow.
Yeah, see, this is the thing that most people don't understand.
But this is why I said I'm underinformed whenever I talk to you.
Yeah, I just speak to a lot more nerds. That's all.
Okay. Okay.
So yeah,
Um,
it was a tool of the aristocracy, the new aristocrats in the Americas. It was also the tool that was used by the pioneers to cross the Mississippi and conquer the lands west. It was also the tool that became mythical because of Jim Bowie, and then people all would say, "Hey, I want a knife just like Jim Bowie." I mean, we still do that shit, right? I want a knife like Rambo so that I can fight like him, and then
right.
it became its own thing. So that's kind of the Bowie knife, right? And then
Mhm.
you had Michel Favier's picture before that. Michel is a very high level doctor and a psychiatrist, and does a lot of trauma work, and also been doing martial arts for 35 years. Keeps a very, very low profile. He's going to come and talk about what actual fatal wounds are, what the knife does, how the blade works, what creates kills, what creates just trauma in the system, and then it leads to amputation. So actually get a doctor and a psychiatrist's view on
Mhm.
what happens with the blade, right? Because look, we love to mythologize and say, hey, I can do this, I can do that. But can you really? And maybe you do, but do you have that a medical professional's perspective on
Right.
what can happen, right?
Yeah.
And then you had TJ's picture there. TJ, man, he's one of the coolest dudes around, right? One
I
of the
mean,
cool,
he has the coolest shot. I
he
looked
is a
at that
cool
and
dude.
I looked at that and I'm like, I have no idea what's going on here.
Yeah, yeah. Well, the guy was the translator to Helio Gracie in the early 80s. So he was rolling with Helio Gracie before people knew BJJ was cool, right?
Okay.
Uh,
Right.
he's walked across Africa through war-torn zones. He's the first outsider for the Colombians to actually say, come in, and they shared multiple lineages with him. And he's a professor of anthropology, very understated, very humble man. But his stories would put the best of us to shame. But you would never know it if you didn't know him, right? So he's going to come and show the art of machete and double machete, and how they fought, how the resistance, the slaves, the people in the forest, how they fought the conquistadors. So
Okay.
that's the aspect that he's going to show. We already spoke about the Bowie knife, and then we also have one other thing which is very American, SCA. Now, SCA, these guys are bloody crazy, and I love them. Okay, so so what do they do? They put on armor from different time periods in Europe. Then they take weapons, and then they fight full contact. Okay,
Okay.
and some of these matches last anywhere from 10 seconds to 2.5 3 minutes. That's just how long it goes until one guy just collapses. Okay,
Right.
so what they are going to bring to the table is from the guy who's coming there, Mr. Paul Porter, is that thousands if not 10,000 matches, right? He's going to show what actually works with the sword, what actually works with the sword and shield. Because hey, look, theory is great, trying to understand something from a book and people's ideas around it, but then who are the guys who actually make it happen, right? And these are guys who are actually played with it, and then play with that and see how these guys fight full contact with a bloody heavy sword. It's a different. Okay, think about it this way: most of your guys know Dog Brothers. Now think about
Right.
Dog Brothers with swords,
Right.
right? That's
Yeah.
just right.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then Joaquin Marcelo, right? I think here in America, he might not be as well known. A brilliant man, right? Moves beautifully. A great expression of later stage JKD. Why he's here is because, look, fencing even influenced the Chinese arts, and especially here in America, right? And he's going to talk very specifically and show how the fencing methods and the fencing footwork came into play in the later stage JKD, right? And that there are some other things about him which make him very interesting. He's from Spain. We're looking at Spain, and he's a professional flamenco dancer. Not many
Right.
people, not many people. I mean, your interview with him was phenomenal, right? And he does all this while being deaf. So I mean, just
Yes.
imagine what he could have done if he
Yeah.
could hear. So he's
Yeah.
he's a he's a brilliant exponent of these arts. So that's kind of a little bit of the lineup of who's coming.
Did we miss anybody? Because
Belzer
on
Sensei.
my
Oh my God.
yeah
Yes.
yeah. Because on my end, the picture of Porter didn't come up. So
I'm not sure
yeah,
why.
okay,
Maybe we missed it. But Belzer Sensei, well, look, man, he's been everywhere. So he was the guy who gave Kali Listrisimo its name,
Mhm.
right? He is hanging out with Don Draeger, studied with Don Draeger. He's a professor at ninth degree black belt in Tanzan Ryu. If you look at Small Circle Jiu-Jitsu, Wally J's book, he's the guy being thrown around by Wally J. You know, uh,
Yeah.
I joke with him. I'm like, anything that I want to study, you've just done it 20 years before me, Sensei. So he's just done that, been there. He started studying with Guru Dan in the late 70s, I believe, right? And then also studied with Chris Kent and Cass Magda, and to this day he continues studying. He's done Sarada. He has an advanced degree in that. I don't know what he's not done. So he's one of those.
Right. Okay.
Mushtaq Ali Ansari, also known as the Traceless Warrior, been doing the martial arts since the 60s. Very low profile. He's been doing FMA and Silat since the 60s. And then Spanish fencing, maybe late 90s, 2000. Maybe off by 1 or 2 years, but at least 20 years, right? And he was sort of adopted into Tausuga Mindanao family from northern Mindanao, and that's how he learned those arts. And he's only taught uh, two people so far, including me, and now he's teaching a third one, and
Right.
and that is that. A
So,
really
so,
really interesting and intense man.
so if a Moro shows up to question him, he'll be like, "Oh, okay, you're the
Actually,
real
they
deal."
did. They did. So one of the
Yeah.
guys did show up by the other guy who's here in the Americas who teaches it is a guy by the name Style Allah. He showed up, and then they're like, "Okay, this is it," and they shake
Yeah.
hands and they walked away, and that's important.
Okay, so there's Porter,
Yeah.
right? I love that shot. Um, and okay, is that everybody? I think
Yeah.
that's it, right? Okay, cool. Okay, right. So yeah, so now people can get full information on the Facebook site, right?
Yeah, the Facebook site, or just go to www.theimmersionlabs.com.
Okay, all right, cool. Now I am still a little bit not concerned. Concerned is not the word, right? But somebody like you, right? I'm always interested in your viewpoint because I'm very aware that, let's call it outsiders, for lack of a different expression, looking in on the world of Jeet Kune Do in which I am so immersed, right? I am currently working on a series of articles that are going to be about Jeet Kune Do as a vehicle for self-development. Right? It's a long time in coming, but, and you know this about me, I have long been annoyed with the absolute childishness of the online Jeet Kune Do world. Okay. Now I like to play in it because it tells me who's who you should take seriously. In fact, my favorite Canadian Jeet Kune Do senior, Cass Magda, very often will go, Dwight, why? That guy's not an authority. Why are you talking to him? You know what I mean, right? I don't mean about people that I bring onto the show. I mean, like
I get it.
he'll look at the thread, right? So I'm very often concerned because I listen to what you're talking about, and I'm like, there is so much martial art knowledge out there in the world that we will never know everything. We'll never discover everything. To limit yourself to this Bruce Lee, because he was in the movies and got famous, and so that's your entire viewpoint, and you're gonna, well, why is Dwight having Mahi on the Jeet Kune? Because we're
You have
talking
no
martial.
idea. You have no idea what my JKD background is to begin with, and I'm not going
Well,
to
there
discuss
is
it.
that too, right? There is that too, and so I just I have this sneaky suspicion that people just laugh at us, you know.
I, I think all of us, no, all of us. And I mean, look, I loved Bruce Lee as much as everybody else did, and he was my. I even had his posters in my room, and I wanted to be like him, cool.
Yeah,
But finger pointing to the moon, man.
yeah, man. I think it's so it's astonishing to me when people cannot see the idea behind being expansive.
I agree, and I think like it comes down to the word educate, right? At the ultimate, at the for me, right, the way I see it, and listen, I also have a very strong bias being Indian and having a pretty solid understanding of our spiritual history and philosophy, right?
Mhm.
So if you look at the word, when he's talking about the art of expressing yourself, for you to express yourself, you got to know yourself. And for you to know yourself, you have to be truly an educated man. And what does it mean to be educated? Educated is not pouring things in or bringing Dwight's model in or Bruce's
Right.
model in. Educate means to bring the light from inside out, right? So
Yes.
that is ultimately the art of expressing yourself.
Yes.
So I think there's a lot of truth in that. There's a lot of deep, profound wisdom with those who can hear, right?
Mhm.
I think he did for martial arts in some ways what Alan Watts did for Asian philosophy in that generation, right?
Yeah.
So, but to be trapped only there in that time period or that frame, it's a decent choice. You can say that, okay, this is where I choose to be, but that
Mhm.
doesn't make it the whole truth. That's the way I see it.
Hey, in I assumed growing up in India that you had somewhat of a what I call the classical British education,
I Yeah, not all my
right?
education was in India. It was a few years, but yes, I've had a old school,
So
classical, old school liberal
yeah,
education.
did you have to study Latin?
Yeah, but I suck at it. Yeah.
Right? Okay, because see, two words in English, and this is something that I hold on to very dearly. Like you just said, the root of educate is to draw out,
Yes.
right? The other thing that I thought about when Bruce Lee talks about the art of expressing yourself, the literal meaning, the literal etymological root of express means to push out.
Correct. Impress is to push in and express is to push out. But for you to
Yes,
be able to push out, you need to first be filled in. And that
right.
inside, that light has to grow on. And that
Yeah.
only happens if you truly follow your fascination, not Bruce Lee's fascination, not
Hmm.
Miyagi's fascination, or Jean-Claude Van Damme's fascination. You got to
Right.
follow your unique fascination.
Yeah.
You got to become
Yeah.
weird in your own particular way.
Imagine when people understand it is the art of getting that which is inside you out.
Yes, but here's the
You
thing,
know,
right? I think this is why people sometimes laugh at us and our community, and I don't talk about this, and I sometimes just cloak myself in very traditional arts and then rebel within it because it gives me more freedom in some
right?
ways. Look, everyone likes to think of themselves as an artiste, but they don't want to pay the price to be an artiste. For you to be an artiste, you've got to learn how to suffer, consciously
Yeah.
suffer, and suffer
Yes.
gracefully, right? And you've got to burn that midnight oil and pay the price. And most people will not see you paying the price, right? Like, look, Mark Stewart is the guy who pushed me out to come into the open, into the public, right? And he's like, no, you got to come out. You got to come out. I was like, no, I don't want to do this. I don't want to do this. He's like, no, you got to come out, right? I lost my thought where I was going with that. But you got to pay the price. So people ask me, oh, you just popped up. I'm like, yeah, it just took me 3.5 decades to pop up.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
And
the overnight success.
yes, but there's no such thing. You
Yeah.
got to pay the price, right? So,
Right. Yeah.
so I think for you to be able to express yourself, have you first followed in the footsteps of people who can show you the way? Number one. Number two, are you willing to constantly humble yourself, right? And so many of us within our community are so caught up on titles and paperwork and, this is my lineage, blah blah blah. One of the best lines I've heard from this wonderful Taoist teacher here in California, Ming Lu. He said, a lineage is a cult I like, and a cult is a lineage I don't like. And that that always stuck with me, right? Because then you're hiding behind somebody else's accomplishments, including Bruce Lee.
Yeah.
Let him rest. Let the man fucking rest. Pardon me.
Mhm.
Let him rest. What are you? Who's showing up for you?
Right.
So that's
Yeah.
why, like, sometimes when people ask me my ranks and who I trained with, I don't answer. I say it's irrelevant. It's either I can do some things or I can't do something.
Yeah.
Otherwise, I'm just borrowing credibility.
Right. Yeah. And again, I think the signs are out there, right? When Linda Lee herself says something about being able to regurgitate Bruce Lee's words, right? I'm paraphrasing. Isn't that impressive?
No.
What's impressive is how you take his words and turn them into something that means something to you and for you. That's what's impressive. You see, so it goes way beyond Bruce Lee. It's like you said, let him rest. Yeah, right. In fact, Cass and I talk about this all the time. The old school JKD people, the mentality was, if you're talking about it all the time, you didn't get it.
You don't have it.
Right.
Yeah.
And that's why a while ago I did a podcast episode about Jeet Kune's invisibility, because I realized that I'm somebody who talks about it all the time, right? So I was like,
no, but you are in a different place. You're trying to shed light on things. Like there's one other example, if I may bring, right? Patrick Strong. Right? Most people, even within the JKD community, don't know who he is.
Right. Yeah.
In my opinion, he's faster than Bruce Lee. You got to see him move. And he studied with Bruce, and then he took Bruce's words to heart, and he moved in his own direction. He was doing BJJ before most of the other guys, hanging out with Hawkins Chung, hanging out with Bobby Tabuada, developing his own thing. And you literally have to extract out the fact from him that he studied with Bruce Lee. He's like, let it go. And he's 18 now and still pure poetry in motion. The man changed my entire idea of what speed means. Yeah. And he's right down in Long Beach. And most people have no idea that this treasure is there. Not only is a wonderful human being, perfect gentleman, a formidable fighter, and he can get into science and tell you neurologically what is actually happening and how you can change your game. See, that's invisible. That to me is mastery. And that to me is taking it in new directions. And what's he interested in? He's interested in finding other weirdos like him who can take it to the next generation, and when I say weird in the best possible way, because the etymology of that word is somebody who has one leg in this world and one leg in the world of the spirit.
Right.
And it's a hard balance to have.
Yeah, but I don't know if you saw it, but a couple of weeks ago I was on with Richard Alanese, who's like an actual shaman. And again, and I am so proud when I'm able through this program to bring people like that, because he doesn't show up, on anybody's radar again, right? And I I knew him from before. I had seen him in LA, but then the picture of the Cabri Cabrong thing came by, and I was like, man, I wonder if this guy would talk to me, right? And lo and behold, so yeah, and then there's you, right?
I just have been lucky and stupid enough not to understand when they said no. It just meant I try harder.
Right.
So,
Yeah. No means not now. Yeah.
yeah,
Right. Yeah. All right. Well, listen, my friend. I appreciate your carving some time out of your Friday afternoon to
of
hang out
course.
with me in my weirdness, and whatever I can do to help you keep promoting the event.
Yeah, no, I really appreciate it. Okay, and just if I may just say a few things before we close up, right? So
Yeah.
the event, it's going to be super intensive, right? It's 40 hours over 3 days. So typically we have two or three guys faint at the event, and I'm not kidding, because when
Right.
you're talking about 14 hours days, just two 1 hour breaks. So that's number one. Number two, I don't repeat any of the things. So don't think, okay, I'll go back next year. No, this is done. It's over. Moved on.
Yeah.
And only 23 people in. Only 23 people will be allowed in, because two, me and one other person are already in the event from organizing it. And we have just I think 3 seats left. So if this is of interest to you, just go online, fill this out. I would love to speak with you and make sure that it's a good match for both of us. I'm not trying to sell you anything. I I, I don't sell. I suck at it. That's one thing I need to learn how to do. uh, you know, uh, it's,
Join the club.
yeah, it's like, oh God, it gives me yeah, it makes me nervous. But uh, yeah, if it's of interest, and if you know if it's a good fit for both you and me, love to see you guys there. But hey, Dwight, I truly appreciate what you do, and truly appreciate you taking the chance and inviting me on here. Even I know the kind of shit you must have gotten for this, but I appreciate it.
That's the type of stuff that I enjoy bobbing and weaving against, man. It's because people are so ridiculous. They really are. They really, really are. I mean, and if if you're a so-called Jeet Kune Do person and you cannot, it just cannot be drilled into your mind that being a Jeet Kune Do person means looking at everything.
Not just that, this is the way I explain it, right? And this pisses people off, but I'll just close with this. Okay, so what is it? It's the art of intercepting, and the art of intercepting, it goes all the way back to the old Koryu, the principle of sense and no sen, and that's the highest form of fighting, the highest form of timing. And
Right.
timing is not exclusive to one art. Most arts had it, and learning
Okay.
how it fits in with you, you got to
Yes.
keep an open mind.
Yes.
Otherwise, if you don't know what you're facing, you won't know how to intercept it.
Right. So when Bruce Lee says that, the Jeet Kune Do guy who is so caught up that Jeet Kune Do is exclusively Jeet Kune Do, Bruce Lee says that guy's not with it. He doesn't get it. Right. So yeah. All right. Okay. All right. So I'm gonna close this up, guys. Thank you very much for hanging out. But Mahi, stay on for a second. I got to talk to you about some
Sure.
stuff. Okay. All right. So everyone, thanks for hanging out with us, and we'll
Thanks,
talk to
guys.
you on the next episode.